Today I'm going to show you how to do shirring. So shirring has definitely had a bit of a moment over the summer thanks to an episode on the latest season of the Great British Sewing Bee where they did some of this really beautiful shirring. I have done this massive piece on just a rectangle of fabric that I plan to turn into a dress at some point, but I haven't quite gotten around to it yet. But I thought I would show you how to go about doing this. It's really lovely. It gives loads of stretch. So it's really nice to create a fitted bodice without actually having to do any darts or princess seams or anything like that. So you've got this really lovely, and you work it with woven fabrics mostly. You probably could use jersey fabrics actually as well. But today I'm using a woven fabric. This is a tencel twill that I bought a few years ago, but I thought it would be perfect as it's plain fabric so you can see it a bit more easily. So I have a piece here that I'm going to share and show you. So sometimes you will have started by hemming the top edge of your fabric, but sometimes shirring will be in the middle of the fabric. So I'm just going to do it on a plain piece of fabric. I've not done any other preparation other than it's been ironed. So to start off with, we are going to measure the lines that we're going to sew along with onto your fabric. When you're shirring, fabric can shift around quite a bit and it can be really hard to follow a straight line. So it helps if you mark onto your fabric the lines that you're going to sew. You can use a chalk or any other erasable marking tool. And I am just using a clear quilted ruler as well. So if you're just doing a practice run, I recommend doing about ½ an inch gap between each line. If you're using a pattern, the pattern will probably tell you how much space to leave in between each line and how many lines to do. You definitely need to do at least, I would say, 5 or 6 lines of shirring. The first 1 or 2 lines can look quite loose, but the more you sew, the more lines you do, the more it will start to bunch up. So to start off with, you need to draw your first line on top of your fabric, and then we're going to measure ½ an inch down and draw the next line. Okay, so once you have measured out your sewing line guide, we need to prepare the sewing machine. The next thing we need to do is prepare the sewing machine, and to start off with, you need to prepare your bobbin thread. So when you're doing shirring, the top thread in your sewing machine will be your regular sew-all thread, but the bobbin is what's going to have the shirring elastic in it. Shirring elastic is very stretchy. It comes in all different colours. I've just got a lilac one here. And when you're shirring, you end up using quite a lot of the thread because you can't use your sewing machine to wind the bobbin. You have to do it by hand and you have to keep it fairly loose. So you end up filling the bobbin up quite quickly. So I recommend having 2 bobbins at least, maybe even 3, depending how much you're going to do, ready to sew before you even start sewing. You're going to put the elastic through the little hole to secure it. And then you're just going to wind it round, trying really hard not to stretch too much. You don't want it to be totally loosey-goosey, but you want to keep an even tension as you're winding. It's not going to look super tidy. It's going to end up being pretty messy, but that's okay. So different machines can act in different ways. I'm using a Janome 230 DC. I know different machines can do things slightly differently, so definitely have a look on YouTube. There are loads of other great tutorials for shirring with different machines. Generally, if you've got a top loading bobbin machine, then this is pretty standard. So we're going to put I've threaded the sewing machine up in the normal way with the top thread, and then I'm going to put the bobbin in and very gently pull the bobbin thread through the bobbin case and pull it up to the top, just like you normally would. So you want to make sure you leave a bit of a tail of both your bobbin elastic and your regular sewing machine thread. And then we are going to change the stitch length on our sewing machine. We're just using a normal straight stitch, and we're going to up the stitch length to about 4. Some machines you might need to play around with the tension a little bit, but I'm just going to give it a go and see how we get on. So sliding your fabric into your machine and lining up the needle with your first stitching line, we are going to sew. We're going to backstitch by just 1 or 2 stitches at the beginning and end of each line of stitching. Because the elastic is a little bit thicker, it can be quite hard to do too much backstitching, but obviously you want to lock your stitches in place. So just do 1 or 2 stitches. And then just sew. When you finish, you need to backstitch a couple more stitches and then pull out the fabric, very gently pulling on the elastic and then letting it go so that it's not pulled all the way out. So when you come to trimming off your threads, it's not going to bounce back inside your machine. So we've got our first line of shirring done, but you can see it's pretty loose at the moment. So the more we sew, the more that's going to start bunching together. So we're just going to carry on. Okay, I have done 4 lines of stitching now, and you can see it is starting to take shape. Definitely, if you're just doing some experimenting, try a few different widths between each stitching line. So instead of following the marked out chalk lines that I did before, I'm going to try doing slightly narrower stitching lines using the edge of my pressing foot as a guide. As you're sewing, you will need to slightly stretch the fabric to try and keep it straight and to keep it out of the way of the new stitching line that you're doing as well. So you can see as I'm sewing that I am just stretching the fabric slightly around the presser foot to try and flatten that bit of the fabric out as we go. Okay, so I have done a few lines with a narrower width between each one, so you can see how they are looking a bit different. This one is looking much closer together, whereas this one's at the top a bit more looser. But I did need to change the bobbin because I ran out of the bobbin thread halfway through one stitch. So when you need to change the bobbin thread, just start sewing like you normally would, finish that length, that line of sewing, and then take it out of the machine, and then all you need to do is tie a little knot in the 2 bobbin threads, the 2 elastic threads, just to make sure that they don't then unravel halfway through wearing your garment. So that is a pretty whistle-stop tour of how to do shirring. It does take quite a while, so make sure you've got some music or a TV program or a good podcast to listen to whilst you're doing it. And yeah, just enjoy the process. It's quite a therapeutic process, but it does take a little while. But it's definitely worth it in the end because you end up with something that looks like this. And I just think it's really tactile. I'm looking forward to making it into a dress and just stroking myself whilst I wear it. I absolutely love it. Thank you so much everyone for watching. If you have any other tips for shirring, or if you have any other how-to videos that you would like me to put together for you, please let me know in the comments. Give this video a like up and subscribe if you haven't already, and I will see you all really soon for another video. Bye.